on today's episode of the Real Foodology podcast.
We do have major problems in our food system, and grazing animals in particular can be one of the best solutions to fixing climate change and also to nourish people, with real food.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Foodology podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Swan. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are a new listener, I'm so happy that you're here. I am the creator behind Real Foodology, which started as a food and recipe blog 11 years ago when I was getting my master's in nutrition. It has since evolved into an education-based Instagram where I share a lot of what I talk about on this podcast. Over there, it's at Real Foodology. And of course, obviously, this podcast. Today's episode is a particularly important conversation to me. If you follow my Instagram, you probably know some of this conversation already because I speak about this a lot. I feel fortunate that I got to bring Diana Rogers on today of the Sustainable Dish podcast and Instagram. She speaks really well to all the nuances around meat and kind of the intersection of healthiness, ethics, and climate. Diana Rogers is a registered dietitian and a real food nutritionist. She's also the author of Sacred Cow, which is an amazing resource if you want to learn more about everything that we talk about today. And she's also a sustainability advocate. She also is a producer and director of the film Sacred Cow, which I highly recommend watching. And she's also the host of the Sustainable Dish podcast. I originally found her through her Instagram. She has such a wealth of knowledge around this whole conversation. She really speaks to all the nuances of it. And I highly recommend following her on Instagram. I linked it in the show notes. It is called Sustainable Dish on Instagram. With that, let's get to the episode. I am currently on a detox protocol because we found mold and some other things. So I am getting in the sauna like 3 to 4 times a week right now. And I've really been having to up my hydration. And perfectly timed, Element just came out with a new flavor, lemonade salt. It's limited time and it is so good. It's salty, it's tart, it's refreshing. It brings you the best of summer wherever you are. It's formulated with Elementee's science-backed electrolyte ratio, and this lemonade salt delivers optimal hydration to keep you feeling refreshed, energized, and ready to take on whatever adventures summer throws your way. You can mix it up with water, add it to your iced tea for a salty Arnold Palmer, which sounds really good. Or you can get creative with a pitcher of salty lemonade and fresh fruit. You could even make mocktails with this or add it to your morning matcha. Here's the deal. It's only available for a limited time, so you're going to want to make sure that you get it while supplies last. So to get a free 8-count sample pack of Elementee's most popular drink mix flavors with any purchase, go to drinkelement.com/realfoodology. That's drinkelement.com/realfoodology. We're living longer than ever, but are we living better? What if the key to not just adding years to your life, but life to your years starts at the cellular level? This particular ingredient called urolithin A helps to increase muscle strength by up to 12% after 16 weeks. It also boosts muscle endurance by up to 17%, and it also supports faster recovery after exercise. And then also, these gummies help with longevity. The ingredient that I mentioned, urolithin A, is essentially food for your mitochondria. And we know that mitochondria play a huge overall role in cellular health and longevity. And this particular gummy delivers 6 times more urolithin A than a glass of pomegranate juice. They're also non-GMO. They are Clean Label Project certified, NSF content certified, and free of major allergens and artificial ingredients. I'm a huge fan, and I've also noticed that my recovery from my workouts has gotten so much better since I've been taking this. I lift 3 to 4 times a week, and I am not as sore as I used to be when I started taking these supplements. I'm super excited to share that you now get 20% off your first Timeline purchase. There's never been a better time to experience the benefits of MitoPure, so use my code REALFoodology at checkout to receive 20% off today. Go to timeline.com/realfoodology gummies. Use code REALFoodology at checkout and you will get 20% off. Diana, I'm so excited and so happy that we finally got connected. As I was just telling you before we started recording, I'm such a huge fan of your Instagram. I was so relieved when I found it because there has been such propaganda around, these fake meats like Beyond Burger and all this stuff, and just trying to convince everyone to go vegan and vegetarian because they're, trying to tell us that this is better for climate change and all that. And your Instagram is so refreshing because you have this way with like putting it into words. And I'm just like, yes, this is the truth. And this is really what people need to hear, because it's so much more complicated than we just have to cut out meat. Like there's so much of the conversation that's not happening. So anyways, before we go into all of that, I want to let you just kind of tell everyone a little bit about what you do. I know you call yourself a real food nutritionist, which I was like kindred spirit. I call myself a real foodist. So so if you want to kind of tell people a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, I am a registered dietitian, and I started my practice just doing one-on-one consults. I was already sort of eating like a paleo type diet when I became a dietitian. And I was living on an organic farm. I started noticing how responsive everybody was to my more farm-related Instagram posts. And everyone wanted to see baby goats, and they wanted to learn more about life on the farm. And it seemed so normal to me, but everyone was like just super interested and wanted to know more about that. And so I started just posting more about the farm, and this is how asparagus grows, comes straight out of the ground. And a lot of people just are so disconnected. They don't know, they haven't seen that. And then I slowly started just getting more political with my podcast. So now if I do post like a beautiful recipe or an image from a farm, it gets like no feedback at all. Everyone wants to learn more about, meat and climate change and ethics and nutrition. And so I had wanted to write this book about meat for a long time with my friend Rob Wolf, who he was my original like entrance into eating paleo. And he kept pushing me off and saying, it's not the right time yet. It's not the right time yet. Like you and I would be the only ones reading this book right now. And we did notice that at conferences, like half the room would be full. And I kept talking to him about like, well, why isn't anyone else in here? Like they've already heard, processed food is bad and like, all this other stuff, but why aren't they like learning about sustainability? Because Rob and I were so passionate about it and really felt like this was the next thing. And, there's other leaders in the area that in the food space that also like Chris Kresser has been hugely supportive, and Mark Sisson. But I don't think the general public, it wasn't on their radar for a while. And now with all of the vegan films that are out there and, all cities and schools cutting out meat or reducing meat, the global dialogue has really shifted. And as people are talking about, how are we going to feed the planet moving forward, there's really no one else out there defending meat from a environmental and nutrition and ethics perspective. So I definitely did not set out to be like the dietitian on the crusade to get everyone to eat meat. I personally don't care if someone chooses not to eat meat. That's fine personally, but we do have major problems in our food system, and grazing animals in particular can be one of the best solutions to fixing climate change and also to nourish people, with real food.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really concerning to see kind of where the dialogue has gone. Because I remember, so when I was getting my master's in nutrition, I mean, I actually originally was on the RD track, and then I went a different route because I wanted a more holistic approach, but I've, great appreciation for the RD track. But I remember when I was going through that program, there was such an emphasis, in the beginning, it was interesting, there was such an emphasis on going vegan and going vegetarian. And then as we got more into it and more into my classes, I had a lot of professors that were actually saying the opposite, where they were like, you need to be careful because we see a lot of women, they go vegan and vegetarian, have hormonal imbalances, et cetera. And just like you, I like to stress this a lot with people and say, at the end of the day, like everyone needs to decide what's best for them. I'm not here to say like, don't go vegan or vegetarian. However, I feel like there's a lot of truth that's being omitted right now in this conversation. And I mean, I was duped for a long time, and I was so grateful to find your work. I also found, Kiss the Ground. That really opened my eyes to this sustainable way of farming, because unfortunately, Everyone is being led to believe that we just need to cut animals out entirely, and that's going to be the solution to climate change, and that this is the more healthy, sustainable, and ethical way of doing it. And it's just not true. So I wanted to really, I felt like you were the perfect person to come on and really like help break this down and help people understand better from all these different viewpoints. So maybe we can start out, first of all, maybe like what regenerative farming is and like why soil health is so important and the role that animals play in that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. And there are a lot of great organizations out there that are doing really important work in the regen ag space. Not as many that understand the nutritional importance of meat. And so I just want to stress that this idea that we should be eating less meat, better meat is actually not where I'm coming from at all. And that's where most of the other organizations are coming from. Only because as a person who really cares about public health and micronutrient deficiencies, telling people to eat less meat is not going to change the food system, and it's certainly not going to help their health. So we're already, protein and micronutrient deficient. And so I try to tell people, eat the best meat you can afford. If you can get regenerative meat, great. But if you can't, you should still be eating the best food you can get your hands on. So that's just where I differ a little bit from some of the other folks in this space. And it can cause, unfortunately, some ripples. People get really stressed out when I start talking about these nuances, but I think they're very important. So regenerative agriculture is the word regenerative has become a little bit of a buzzword, and unfortunately, some groups are using it a little bit as a form of greenwashing. So, I mean, really the back to the land folks that, wanted to do organic farming starting in the 60s and 70s, their goal was to improve the land. The idea of sustainability was actually, let's improve the land while we're farming it. And so some people say, well, regenerative is the only solution. And that's not true. Anyone who's growing food and improving the ecosystem while they're doing it is doing a great job. So I don't believe that it has to be, quote unquote, regenerative or nothing. And so, but the idea behind the word regenerative is that it's not just sustaining, it's actually improving. Yeah. But again, that was the goal of everybody who got into this movement, from all along. And you can't have a truly regenerative food system without including animals in that system, because you need some way of putting nutrients back in the soil. And, on small garden type areas, like in a backyard garden or maybe on an urban garden plot, it is possible to grow plants with, just compost and things like that. But at any sort of scale, you have to have animal inputs, whether that's horse manure from the horse farm up the street or animals actually grazing on the land. You absolutely have to have some type of animal input in order to really produce food at scale. And the most efficient way for us to be getting our protein is really from animals anyway. So the type of grazing underneath the regenerative ideals are to not do what we call continuous grazing. So if you imagine you have 100 head of cows and 1,000 acres, right? So typically a rancher might just let them out in the field for the whole entire season, and they would just go around grazing however. In this type of regenerative managed grazing, you would section the field into much smaller paddocks and intensively graze each section at a time, allowing the cows to mow the grass, but then moving them sometimes once a day. Sometimes farmers will do it multiple times a day. Sometimes it's every 3 days, just depends on where you are, what the land quality is, what the pasture quality is, how many animals you have, But the idea is that you intensively graze and mow everything down, and then you move them off and allow that land to rest. And this does a few things. Number one, it ensures that everything gets eaten. Because just like a salad bar or a buffet line, some people will go for their favorite tasty things and leave other things, right? And the problem is if you allow the cattle to graze only their favorite plants, they're going to graze them all the way down on the ground and kill them and actually reduce the health of that pasture. So by forcing them to eat everything all at once and then moving them off, they're actually getting a more balanced diet, and you're maintaining the diversity of forage that's in there, because a pasture isn't just blades of grass. It's all kinds of things that are out there. So it's healthier for the animals because they're getting a more balanced diet, but also they're less likely to get infected with parasites, because if you have one animal that has worms, and that happens, the other animals, if they're eating constantly over the areas where that one that has the parasite pooped, then now everybody has a parasite problem. If you're moving them constantly, they're less likely to be regrazing those areas, and the parasites won't live as long because the birds come and they, eat through everything and pick out all the worms and things like that. And then also this is much healthier for the biodiversity of the soil, because it allows the land to rest after it's been heavily grazed. And that's really when the carbon sequestration can happen. It's during that rest period. So a grass's root system is usually about as deep, the roots go as deep as the grass is tall. So what happens is the cow is grazing down, and that actually kills the roots at the bottom, but then actually stimulates new growth. And so if you're just going to have a pasture with no animals grazing, there's nothing to stimulate new growth again. And so it needs to be biologically chomped down by an animal and then allowed to regrow and then fertilized with the manure from that animal. And that's how you have the healthiest ecosystem. And that's how you end up having more diverse, not only plant life, but fungal and bacterial life underground. And also in those areas, you have wild birds come back. You have, much more diversity of all kinds of creatures on that land. And the healthiest ecosystems are the most diverse ecosystems.
There's a lot going on in the world right now, and it feels a little chaotic. So protecting your peace is not just important, but it's absolutely essential. That's where Cured Nutrition comes in. They have these Serenity gummies that are my go-to ally for navigating just life, especially when it's feeling chaotic. And it helps me feel a little bit more grounded and just feel better, because when I feel better, I can show up for my people and moments that matter the most in life. These gummies aren't just tasty treats. They are a powerful blend of science-backed ingredients like ashwagandha, reishi mushroom, L-theanine, and they have a microdose of THC in there. Each ingredient is carefully selected to support mind, body, calm, and balance, helping me navigate life's whirlwind moments with clarity and ease. At the end of the day, I like to use Serenity gummies as a natural, alcohol-free way to unwind. Whether I'm resetting after a packed schedule or carving out space for quick meditation, my gummies help me find my daily dose of peace and presence without the negative effects of alcohol, artificial flavors, sugars, or dyes. I'm obsessed with the passion fruit flavor personally. They're sweet with just a hint of earthiness, and I love that each gummy is precisely dosed to guide me to my happy place. And if you're looking for better sleep, you can actually get the best seller bundle, which is the Serenity gummies and the CBN nightcaps. These CBN nightcaps are formulated to work with your natural rhythms for deep restorative sleep through every sleep stage. They're blended with MCT oil for better absorption and lasting overnight support. These do not have any THC in them. And if you use my code, this seller bundle is already discounted at 10% off, but when you use the code, it stacks an additional 20% off. So stack my 20% off code, RealFoodology, on the 10% off bestseller bundle. Go to curednutrition.com/RealFoodology. and use code RealFoodology. Again, that's curednutrition.com/realfoodology, or you can also just use code RealFoodology at curednutrition.com. If you follow me on Instagram, you know how particular I am about skincare. In fact, I've only used the same products for about the last 6 years on my skin, and my skin has never been clearer. And you know how much I love Clear Stem. Their hydrating barrier cleanser, it's called Gentle Clean, is the best face wash that I have ever used. I have kind of drier skin, and whenever I use their face wash, it gets all of my makeup off, but it doesn't leave your skin feeling dry and stripped. It somehow still leaves it feeling kind of dewy. They nailed it with this face wash. I cannot speak highly enough about it. And also their skin spray all day. It's their hydration mist. I'm just using this all day. I have one in my travel bag. I have one in my purse. I have one in my car, and I'm just using it all day to just maintain that nice dewy look. They have so many amazing products. I could go on for hours about everything that I love on their website. But if you're new to ClearStem, they are the first clinically effective skincare wellness routine formulated with 0 pore clogging ingredients ever. This is literally their clear pore promise. And they were formulated to not only target acne, so if you have acne prone skin, but it's also anti-aging at the same time. I have an entire episode with the founders of ClearStem. We go more into depth about how they created these products to not only target acne, but also target anti-aging. So you don't even have to have acne prone skin in order to use these products. And they are amazing. I highly recommend going out and just checking out their whole website. If you want to try ClearStem, make sure you go to clearstem.com/realfoodology and use code RealFoodology at checkout for 15% off your first order. That's CLEARSTEM.com/realfoodology and code RealFoodology for 15% off. Discover the ClearStem difference, because clear skin changes everything. Yeah, that's really important. I think that right there has really been lost on people. And also, I think it's important to note too, is that our food that we're growing on that land is only as healthy as the soil is. And if we are completely, ruining that topsoil, we're tilling, we're spraying with pesticides instead of allowing that diversity and allowing, at time to rest from being grazed on and all this stuff, then our food's not going to be as healthy because our soil's not as healthy.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so the problem with tilling and planting crops is that by putting a machine in the ground and breaking up that soil, you're actually releasing carbon, number one, but you're also killing all the fungal networks and all the bacteria that's living in the soil. And so that's why the idea of monocropping is so dangerous, because you have to kill an entire ecosystem. Whatever was living there needs to die in order for you to come in with these tractors, plow up the ground, plant only one type of plant, rows of soy or rows of corn or rows of wheat. And then how are you going to fertilize it? You need to come in with chemical pesticides and fertilizers and, to make sure that no weeds come up, no invasive insects come in. So the process of growing plants is actually quite harmful compared to just grazing animals, leaving the land unplowed and untouched.
Yeah, oh, man. Okay. And you touched on a couple different things that I want to start getting into. First and foremost, I meant to say this and I forgot. I'm so glad that you touched on the quality of the meat, because I personally, as a nutritionist, and, I consider myself an educator in this space, I spent the last, I would say, probably 12 years telling people, if you can't get really high quality meat, just eat vegetarian out. And I more recently have been reading, I heard you say this on, I think it was Joe Rogan's podcast recently. I've heard some other people, some other experts in the field that are saying, it's better to just have the meat if you can't get your hands on, the organic regenerative. Obviously buy it as much as you possibly can, but we really should be focusing on eating more meat, not cutting it out and eating less, which I think is really important to note. And I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say on that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most controversial pieces of the book, Sacred Cow, is that we looked at all the research that was currently out on the differences between grass-fed beef and typical beef that you would get in a grocery store. And the reality is there's not that much difference. Like when it actually comes down to it, a steak from an animal that was finished on grass versus an animal that was finished on a feedlot are nearly identical. It's not going to really change your overall health to just switch out, for different types of meat. You're not going to be eating any extra pesticides, any glyphosate. The fatty acid ratio is a little bit different in some samples, not consistently in all samples. And also, so you'll hear people say, well, grass-fed beef has a better omega-3 to 6 ratio, right? Mm-hmm. But the problem is you have to look at the overall diet of somebody and look at their omega-6 to 3 ratio, right? And just swapping out typical beef for grass-fed beef is not going to, it's like saying, well, eat this one blueberry and that's going to change your life. You would still have to eat about 8 pounds of grass-fed beef to get the same omega-3s that you can get in a small piece of wild salmon. And so if you're looking for omega-3s and want to improve your ratio, the best thing is to eat fatty fish like wild salmon, which has its own sustainability issues, right?
Oh, yeah.
And cut down on ultra-processed foods and just eat more real foods. And so just overall cut out your omega-6. So there's new stuff coming out now about polyphenols and different compounds that we're seeing in grass-fed beef, which is great. I'm certain that there is more that we don't know. However, there is no RDA for polyphenols. We don't really know what they do in the body or how much we need or anything like that. And so, and a lot of people also will think, well, for the environment or for, animal welfare, I don't want an animal that was raised in a confined feeding operation, right? But what most people don't know is that all cattle are grass-fed. They all start on a pasture, like a calf cow operation out usually in America. It's somewhere in Colorado or Montana. And then they're either finished on a feedlot for about 3 months or so, or they continue on grass. So it's really just about 3 months out of their life that they would be on a feedlot. And compared to chicken and pork, where they spend their entire lives indoors in a factory setting, cattle, relatively speaking, typical cattle are have a much better quality of life than a factory farmed chicken or a pig. And it's healthier meat as well, overall.
So you had mentioned that fertilizer that's used on these farms often will have, like the manure from animals, or they also throw in like bone meal, blood meal, feather meal. This is something that was very mind-blowing for me when you started pointing this out, is that there is no such thing as a bloodless diet. So we have all these vegans and vegetarians, and this is not to talk crap on them, but I'm just saying that everyone is, like the animals. Well, what about all the little ground critters that are getting destroyed by the monocrop farming? And this is what drives me so crazy about these Beyond Burgers, right? And Impossible is everyone's saying oh, we'll eat these fake meats and it's better for the environment. It's better for the animals. And I'm like, this is literally contributing to the monocrop farming that's also destroying the lives of all of these little ground animals. Are we not concerned about all those?
Right. And it's not just ground animals, because then when you're killing all the insects, the birds have no food. And we're seeing a huge decline in bird populations because they have nothing to eat as they're migrating. And so actually the Audubon Society is working with ranchers now to try to increase more great ranching so that there's habitat for the birds as they fly across the US and go south for winter. They have bees. Bees, plus everything that is required underground in order to keep everything healthy. So again, the healthiest ecosystems have the largest diversity of life in them. And that should be the goal, is actually the opposite of a monocrop. You want as many different things growing there as possible. And so actually the healthiest farms too are the ones that are, raising cattle and then following it with chicken, and then they've got pigs. And I mean, it's just like if you picture your health or, your farm as a diversified portfolio, right? It's very risky to invest in just one stock. You want to hedge your bets and diversify. That way you'll get, if you think about it in terms of nutrition, you're going to get a little bit of different micronutrients from, these types of fruits or plants or berries or whatever. Same deal with farms. You want to have as many different things as possible. That's going to be the healthiest solution.
Yeah, it's so interesting. When I was watching your documentary, Sacred Cow, which is amazing, by the way, and I was really touched by, there was a vegan who was talking, or I think she was a previous vegan, where she was saying that this is when she really turned the corner because she realized, like, okay, no matter what, animals are going to die at the expense of farming and at the expense of me eating. So there's really no choice left but to just do it well and to support the farmers that are doing it right.
Yes. And so she taught, this is Leah Keith, and she wrote an amazing book called The Vegetarian Myth. And so she says in the film, you could either be, you're going to be a part of death. So you can either be a part of the death that kills things like monocropping, or a part of the death that brings more life. So if you picture one cow can provide about 500 pounds of meat, while increasing the ecosystem function of that land, while, bringing back bird populations, while, providing habitat for bunnies and frogs and all the things and healthier waterways and all of this, that should be the diet of least harm, not a diet where you're just eating packaged foods and pretending that nothing died.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what really blew my mind when it came to all of this whole conversation. Because, at the end of the day, it's a circle of life. And it's just the unfortunate reality that all of us have to face at some point. It's not comfortable, but it's part of what we have to do while living on this planet, is that we have to, we just have to reconcile with that death is also part of life.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It just is. Yep.
Did you know that all chips and fries used to be cooked in beef tallow up until the 1990s, until big corporations actually switched to cheap processed seed oils? Today, seed oils make up 20% of the average American's daily calories, and recent studies have linked seed oils to metabolic health issues and inflammation in the body. This is why Masa decided to do something about it. They created a tasty and delicious tortilla chip with just 3 ingredients and no seed oils. It's organic nixtamalized corn, sea salt, and 100% grass-fed beef tallow. These chips don't only avoid all the bad stuff, but they taste incredible too. Masa is a crunchier, tastier, and sturdier than other chips. These chips do not break in your guac, and it is fabulous. They are the sturdiest chips I've ever had, and they are also so good. Snacking on Masa chips is nothing like eating regular chips. With Masa, you feel satisfied, light, and energetic with no crash, bloat, or gross, sluggish feeling afterwards. And an added bonus is that the beef tallow makes the chips so much more satiating, so you won't find yourself uncontrollably binging and still feeling hungry afterwards. Personally, my favorite flavors are the Cobanero and the lime. I also really like the white chips too. Are you ready to give Masa a try? Go to masachips.com/realfoodology and use code realfoodology for 25% off your first order. Again, that's masachips.com/realfoodology and use code realfoodology for 25% off your first order. Don't feel like ordering online? Starting in October, Masa will be available nationwide at your local Sprouts supermarket. Stop by and pick up a bag before they're gone. 2 of the most powerful supplements for women's health are whey protein and creatine, and they're often misunderstood and seriously underrated. Studies show that women have about 70 to 80% lower natural creatine stores than men, which impacts muscle function, brain energy, and even mood. Puree Creatine Plus combines pure creatine monohydrate with taurine to support strength, performance, and cognitive health. It's especially beneficial for both pre- and postmenopausal women. Like everything Puree makes, each batch of Creatine Plus is third-party tested for over 200 harmful contaminants and clean certified by the Clean Label Project. You're not only getting clean, safe ingredients, the test results are published online for complete transparency. Just scan the QR code on every product to see your exact batch's results. I use the Creatine Plus in a couple different ways. One way is I will make a whey protein shake in the morning and I'll add in some fruit and some coconut milk and then a scoop of the Creatine Plus. Or I love making these protein yogurt bowls with coconut yogurt, the Creatine Plus, and whey protein. And then I add a little bit of either grain-free granola on top, maybe some fruit, and that's it. Puree checks all the boxes: purity, potency, and peace of mind. So feel the difference for yourself and go to puree.com/realfoodology and use the code realfoodology at checkout for 20% off. The code even works on their already discounted subscriptions, giving you almost a third off the regular price. Don't wait. Try Creatine Plus today. Clean, science-backed supplements that you can actually trust. So go to PUORI.com/realfoodology and use the code realfoodology. So let's go a little bit into the health aspect of this, because I think there's there's kind of there's three main things happening right now in this whole conversation, and they're coming at it from, an ethical standpoint, which we just covered. And then there's also the health standpoint, and then of course the climate. So, there's all this propaganda right now saying that it's better for your health. It lowers your cholesterol by cutting out meat. We would all do better with eating less meat. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because this drives me nuts. I feel like we are now blaming all of these foods that we've eaten for thousands of years. Think like eggs, meat, butter. We're blaming all of these chronic modern diseases on those foods that we've been eating for thousands of years. And I'm like, no, this is not right.
Yeah. So the problem is it's really hard to do nutrition research. You can't lock people in a lab for 30 years, feed them one diet, and then have people in a different room feeding them the same diet, but just chicken instead of beef, right? And it takes a long time to develop cancers, for example.
Yeah.
And so what most nutrition research is population observation. So they'll look at people who live in Mexico and then people who live in Finland and notice, okay, we've got more cancer in Finland and, they eat more meat. It must be the meat. And that's just, so correlation does not equal causation. So that's just a basic fundamental of statistics. You can't compare people in Finland to people in Mexico. There's so many different variables there. There's a difference of socioeconomics for one, which is the biggest driver of health there is. So people who have more money are healthier. They have better access to healthcare. They have less stress in their life. They have the privilege to worry about long-term health. Being concerned about diet quality and long-term health is a position of privilege that a lot of people don't have. And so, telling certain people that meat is bad is basically an elitist position, because pulling meat away from people that can't even afford to push away meat in the first place is unethical. So meat is a nutrient-dense food. There's only been one randomized control, experimental study looking at meat versus less meat. And it was done in Kenya at a school, at 12 different schools. And one group of school kids got a meat snack at school. One group got a milk snack. One group got extra calories, just overall calories. And then there was a control group that didn't get any snack, unfortunately, for that group.
Oh, God.
And the meat group did the best. They did the best academically. They did the best physically with their muscles. And then also behaviorally, they did the best. And so we know that more meat to at least these school children is a better thing. But the study showing blue zones, I actually have a blog post coming out soon about why the blue zone study makes no sense. Just overall, looking at different populations and saying, oh, well, these people ate the meat, so it must be the meat. When they've looked at populations, for example, that shop at health food stores. So there you're sort of adjusting for lifestyle. People, if you picture a typical vegetarian in America, you might imagine that they're probably doing some yoga, meditating, eating lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, which is always a good thing. And, maybe they take some supplements, they drink filtered water, they go to, the smallest little sign of any kind of blip in their body and they're running to the doctor to get checked out, right? You compare that to your typical tailgating dude who's drinking 6-packs all the time and also happens to eat hot dogs. It's not the meat that's the problem there. It's not the burgers or the steaks, right? Yeah. And so when they've looked at people that shop at health food stores overall and compared the ones who eat meat versus the ones who don't eat meat, they've found absolutely no difference at all in health or longevity, and actually negative outcomes with vegans in those populations.
Yeah, well, I recently read a study that showed that lower consumption of meat in women specifically, they found a higher incidence of anxiety and depression.
Yep, and you see a higher incidence of bone fractures overall in men and women in vegans. There just are nutrients that are either completely unavailable or very hard to access from plants. So anytime you have a nutrient that's in a plant or an animal sourced food, the body always prefers that animal source version. So for example, vitamin A. You can get that from eating a sweet potato, but it comes in the form of beta carotene, which your body needs to convert to vitamin A. In animal source foods, it's already coming in the form of retinol, which is the active form of vitamin A. And about 50% of all humans genetically can't make that conversion very well. So that's why we see some people doing a little bit better on plant-based diets than others. And some people, go straight downhill. Other people seem to do better for a period of time on a plant-based diet. You still need lots of supplements. You still need a lot of planning, and it is still a diet of privilege.
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, I think about the poor kids in New York who now they're being forced to have, I believe it's Meatless Mondays and Fridays now. And you think about the kids in the lower socioeconomic families where some of the only meals that they get are at school. And so now they're depriving them of meat, which is really sad because, I mean, what you just brought up is that, one of the favorite arguments for vegans is like, oh, you can get every single vitamin and nutrient that you need through your food, even when you're vegan, like through plant-based foods. And I'm like, that's just absolutely not true. And not all of the forms are bioavailable, like you said. And also B12 only exists in the form of meat. So if you're not eating meat, you have to supplement. And to me, I'm like, that is a place of privilege. If you're having to then take supplements on top of your normal diet, like not everyone even has access to get supplements.
Right. And I think the bigger problem too is that these meat-free campaigns in schools are telling kids that it's immoral to eat meat, that it's bad to eat meat, it's unhealthy, it's bad for the environment, and you're just kind of a bad person to eat meat. And that has a ripple effect because the most favorited foods by kids are, pizza, mac and cheese, burgers, maybe,
French fries,
a Subway sandwich, so what they're just going to they're not going to go and get an $18 kale and quinoa bowl at Sweetgreen, right? Their choice is to, go to Subway and get a sandwich without the meat on it. Like that's the reality of what this is. And also the information that they're feeding them, especially the Meatless Mondays campaign. And I get a lot of flack for this, but it's inaccurate information. So Meatless Mondays has a big series of infographics that you can get from their website to post in your kid's school or whatever. And it's all misleading and misrepresentative of, negatively towards the livestock industry. So they might say, decrease your chance of diabetes by 15% by reducing your meat and eating more bean soups. And it's like, okay, well, a 15% decrease in a risk is actually statistically insignificant, number one. Number two, there is no cause. It's just an association. So again, it's like, well, these people ate bean soups and these people ate meat, and we saw 15% less incidence of diabetes in these people. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They might say, your burger takes, there's another one, your burger takes 10 bathtubs full of water to make. As if all of the moisture that cow is eating through the grass, which is the majority of their water footprint, it's just moisture that's in grass, it's rainfall, that would be there whether or not the cow ate it or not. And it's saying basically that, that competes with us for drinking water. It does not. So it's really terrible, these messages.
Well, I mean, it's lying. It's propaganda. And what is it? I always forget what this is, but what is it with regenerative farming that causes? I feel like I'm going to mess this up, but it's not about how much rain you get; it's how much you retain. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. So a good example of that is the Chihuahuan Desert, or even just the rainfall simulator that we filmed at Michigan State University, where they're doing a lot of really great regenerative agriculture research right now. Mm-hmm. And so in the film, we do a rainfall demonstration where we show, basically bare soil that's been tilled. And so when the rain comes down on it, it just washes away. Like the rain doesn't actually seep into the ground versus a thick carpet of grass. The rain is going to go into that thick carpet of grass. And so what you need is a thick carpet of grass. You don't want hard, compacted soil that's going to run off, or, is going to be like cement and the water is just going to evaporate away. So, so properly grazed animals actually increase the water holding capacity of that soil. So you think of like a plush carpet versus a concrete floor, basically. You want the plush carpet. So if you spill something on a carpet, it's going to go in there, right? You can't like mop it up. So that's kind of what it's like.
Yeah. I mean, and this is why, again, it's so important to have these conversations about all the nuances, because, people are just reading, or kids are reading this at school thinking like, oh my God, it's taking 10 bathtubs of water for my burger. When in reality, like what you just said, is that if the soil is managed properly, we don't have to worry about that so much, because it's retaining a lot of the moisture. So it's not like it's taking the water away from us specifically. This is where I really have a hard time. And then, back to the vegan conversation a little bit, what I really struggle with, and I went through this personally, so I have my own anecdotal evidence of this, but I was vegetarian for 5 years. And what happens often, not always, is that veganism, vegetarianism becomes part of your identity. And what I struggled with this. I remember, I was like, so very, very beginning of being vegetarian, I was like, this is great. I lost weight. I didn't even mean to. I feel great. I have energy, all this stuff. Okay, well, fast forward to 5 years in, I am having aggressive dreams about meat because I'm craving it so bad. I am so fatigued. I'm, almost 40 pounds heavier than I was when I started out. I am constantly eating, constantly starving, just craving so much sugar. I also had really crazy cystic acne because my hormones were just like all over the place. And I had a nutritionist tell me in her office, she looked me straight in the eyes and she goes, Courtney, you have to eat meat. And I left her office sobbing. I called my mom. I was like, she's so mean. Like, this is horrible, because I had made vegetarian my identity. And I was like, I'm going to be vegetarian for life. And I was ignoring all the signs of my body completely screaming. And I kept, reading and thinking, oh, I'm just not vegetarian enough. Or I was being told, you're just not doing vegetarian right. I had done it for 5 years. I was also studying nutrition at the time. So I was doing, quote unquote, all the right things, the best of my ability. And then the second that I started eating meat again, I was like, oh my God, I just needed to eat meat. I didn't need to be more vegetarian. And this is what I don't like, is that now we're telling people to ignore all the bodily symptoms and signs. If you are vegetarian or vegan and you are thriving and you feel great and you have energy and like you feel good, I love this for you. But if someone is vegan or vegetarian and they're just being told that this is the healthier way and you just got to keep forging through while ignoring your body screaming and telling you that it needs something, this is where I have the problem with it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And so the average vegan only lasts, I believe, 3 months before they go back to eating meat. And we know that the meat, the fake meat sales are not doing well. They're sort of almost being subsidized to be on the shelves to make it look like it's more successful than it is. It takes a lot of energy to produce those products when you can just have a cow on grass. And so it's just incredibly misguided and is actually doing more harm than good.
Yeah. Yeah, because like I said, unfortunately, it's causing people to ignore the signs and symptoms of their own body. And this is exactly goes against what you and I preach, where it's like, you got to figure out what works best for you. Listen to your body. It tells you what it needs most of the time, So I want to go over the last component of this. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but I've heard you say in Sacred Cow and also like on your Instagram, it's not the cow, it's the how. And there's all this conversation right now saying like, oh, cow farts are causing all the carbon in the atmosphere, and this is the biggest driver of climate change and all this stuff. But what about the cars on the road? What about the fossil fuel manufacturing? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a very complex thing. And there's two different, number one, the methane produced by cattle worldwide is only 5% of methane emissions. So it's not the biggest driver. The numbers are way, way, way higher for transportation, for consumerism, all that kind of stuff. So cattle are 5%. In the US, it's about 2.5% of our emissions. But that's because we have a higher ratio of cars to cows here than in other less developed countries. But also the methane that comes from cattle is actually part of a biogenic cycle, as opposed to the fossil fuel burning, which is a one-way situation. And it's a little bit easier to look at one of my graphics or to watch the film and see the animation that I do. But basically, if you were to imagine a cow on grass, it's not farts, actually, it's belching.
Oh, yeah.
So they have a lot of bacteria in their stomach chambers, and as it is breaking down the grass and the other stuff that's the cow is eating, methane gets produced. Same thing like when things just decompose, right? Like a peat bog or something. There's a lot of methane that comes from that. The methane goes into the atmosphere for about 10 years, and then after 10 years, it gets converted to water and CO2. So the water becomes part of the rain cycle, and the CO2 goes back into the plant life. Through photosynthesis, the plants give off oxygen, which is what we need to breathe. And then the carbon becomes part of the grass, the roots, and some of it can even get sequestered in the ground. So there's a constant gas exchange happening. It's a circle. In the burning of fossil fuels, it is just pumping carbon dioxide and methane straight into the atmosphere. And there's no natural other side of the equation to absorb it. So by far, the biggest contributor to the increase that we're seeing in climate change is the burning of fossil fuels, and not, and in North America, we don't have more methane producing animals than we did before we got rid of the bison. So, so there's anywhere between, the most numbers consider about 60 million bison were here, but then you have to think about all the other wild deer, goats, all of the other large animals, grazing animals that were in North America before we ripped everything up and killed everything and turned it all into corn, right? Yeah. Today we have more cows, but we actually, the overall number of our beef cattle herd is not more than the number of grazing animals we had in the 1600s. And so we don't have net more methane producing animals right now than we did.
That's really interesting. I hadn't heard that. And just for people listening, and also I want clarification of this too. So when you say sequestering carbon, this act of doing regenerative farming, which means that we allow the cows to graze and do as nature intended, the sequestering carbon means that it actually pulls the carbon out of the atmosphere and back into the soil. Is that correct?
Yes. And so what happens is all plants are taking in CO2. That's what they need, and water in order to grow, and sunlight. And through the process of photosynthesis, they give off O2, which is oxygen. And then the C, the carbon is life. So we are made of carbon. Plants are made of carbon. The plants then take in the carbon. It becomes the plant. It becomes the roots. But then it's also dripping little. So carbon is basically sugar molecules that are going down into the soil, and plants need all kinds of nutrients, but their roots can't access all of the nutrients they need. And so what happens is they're leaking down carbon, and then the bacteria are eating the carbon and exchanging the carbon for nutrients that the plant needs. And then there's fungal networks too, that are the long branches of little fungal networks that are going down and mining minerals from the rocks and bringing that to the plant in exchange for the carbon, because the fungus needs the carbon. And so there's this whole symbiotic relationship happening underground. And then as the roots die back, that carbon from the roots, along with all other dead stuff that's in there just through the cycle of life, is the carbon that can get locked in, and building new soil is also extra carbon. And so that's how the Great Plains that's why it's so fertile. in our breadbasket. It's because bison were grazing and pooping, and this whole process was happening, building soil over thousands and thousands of years. And that's what can happen on a regenerative farm.
That's amazing. I mean, it's just a reminder that, nature has everything that we need. Nature has this all figured out. Why are we coming in and trying to destroy all of these amazing things that are already in place? And we're only causing more harm right now.
Yeah,
like we're trying to come up with
the more plant-based we go, the more harm it's going to be, to our health, because we'll be nutrient deprived. So there was one study that looked at what would happen if we eliminated all animals from our food system in the US. And they found that our calorie intake would go up, our carb intake would go up. So we don't need that right now. So we've got 70% of Americans are overweight or obese, and, our crisis with type 2 diabetes. Plus our nutrient deficiencies would go up in multiple nutrients: calcium, vitamin A, B12, and then essential fatty acids. So we need animal source foods to thrive as humans. We're omnivores, and that's just, how we evolved. And interestingly, we also need animals in the mix on any farm that claims to be sustainable.
Yeah. And we can't supplement our way out of this.
No, because the supplement industry has its own problems. We have to mine minerals. We have to grow the B12. Like it's not like they just magically kind of get plucked from a supplement tree.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on something really important about our health is, and I mean, I experienced this myself. What's so funny is that we're already having this chronic obesity crisis, and then we're having this crisis with type 2 diabetes as well. And then we're encouraging people to just eat more carbs right now and reduce their meat. And we need to be doing the exact opposite, because we know that especially if someone is already dealing with insulin resistance, which is type 2 diabetes, they're having a hard time controlling their blood sugar. We don't want to throw more carbs in the mix. We want to throw more protein and fat in the mix.
Right. And the fats, unfortunately, are coming from ultra-processed seed oils, not natural good fats that are what we need to be eating. So,
yeah.
And the more protein people eat, the more satiated they are, and the less likely they are to overconsume calories. So my recommendations for meat intake are much, much higher than the RDA for meat.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know Paleo Valley, they're grass-fed beef sticks.
I love Paleo Valley.
Oh, I love them. I make jokes all the time on Instagram that they're like my supplement. I eat them like a supplement every day because they're so good and they're so good for you.
Yeah. And they're also just an awesome company. They've been hugely supportive of my work from day one. I mean, like from the day I first met them, they were huge sponsors of my film. They're just really, really good people. And I'm excited about the new stuff that they're coming out with. And I'm going to be doing some partnerships with them moving forward. So it's funny you brought them up because, not only do they make a delicious, healthy product, but they're just like really good people too.
Yeah. I've had a couple of calls with them as well because they've been sponsoring the podcast and my Instagram. So yeah, I love them. Huge fan. So now that we've kind of covered all this, then I'm sure everyone's kind of going, okay, well, what do we eat?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I have a solution to that. So in the back of the book Sacred Cow, I do have a nutrition plan that is basically sort of like a Whole30 paleo type challenge. I do have an emphasis on micronutrient density. So really paying attention to food quality. I teach people how to track their micronutrient intake through an app, and also how to calculate their protein needs because it is much higher than what most people think. So I've never once had someone walk into my nutrition practice eating what I consider is adequate protein. So, but I actually have a course that I developed called Sustainivore.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it's on my website. It's, or they can just go to sustainivore.com, and I take them through from the very start, how people can, just learn the boot camp basics about real food nutrition, how to calculate their protein, track their protein intake, their micronutrient intake. And then in the subsequent chapters, I tell them why. So they can right off the bat, they just start on their nutrition challenge. And then I go through everything you and I talked about, plus so much more. So it's like 9 or 10 chapters long. And they learn everything about the environment, about plant production, about greenhouse gases and water. And I have a whole chapter on ethics. I talk about what happens when people eliminate all plants and eliminate all meat and just eat plants. And so it's been really, really popular. But they can also just check out like the shorter version of it in the book Sacred Cow as well.
Okay, amazing. Well, those are all great resources. So we'll link all that in the show notes so everyone can get to it. So I'm sure before we wrap this up, people are also wondering, how can they better support this? So how can they support these farming practices? Where should they look for their meat if they want to support the regenerative farming? Like kind of how do they get involved if they want to get involved?
Yeah. So I started a nonprofit group after I did the film called the Global Food Justice Alliance. And that has its own Instagram feed and website, and people can join the Patreon there. And that is more dedicated to making sure that global food policies allow for the choice to have animal source foods. And so it's a lot of academics and doctors and nutritionists that are on the advisory circle. And I am going to be flying around the world, like a different country every single month between now and the end of this year. Amazing. Just talking to governments, different politicians, press, and at conferences, all about the inequities of pulling meat away from people and why it's so dangerous. And so I do have organizations on there. I'm a big fan of Savory Institute that teaches farmers how to do regenerative grazing. I'm a huge fan of Heifer International. They're the ones at Christmas time that you can like buy a water buffalo for a family in Vietnam or whatever. But they actually, that's a very creative campaign, but they're actually doing really incredible, important work because for example, and you probably don't know this, I didn't know this until I started looking into it, that in about half the countries in the world, women can't own land, but they can own livestock. So being able to have some chickens or some goats is hugely liberating, not only nutritionally for the family, but also economically for these women. So Heifer has done some amazing work, especially in Nepal around all that. And I'm trying to think. I mean, you had mentioned, Kiss the Ground is doing some good stuff. So there's a lot of regen ag organizations out there, not as many defending the nutritional rights for people to have meat and to push back against these gigantic corporations and people like Bill Gates. Yeah. And so that's what my main focus is right now.
Oh, that's so amazing. Well, your voice is so needed and so important. And I just wanted, give you recognition for that and say thank you for doing what you're doing. It's really important. Yeah, it's amazing. I also want to add on that too. If you can go to farmers markets and find farmers in your area that are doing these that are doing these amazing practices like regenerative farming. I know Force of Nature, you can order them online. I love their meat a lot. It comes from a regenerative farm in Fredericksburg, Texas. And
I've been there. They're awesome people too. White Oak Pastures is amazing. Yeah, there's definitely some really good options, or people can find a local farmer. There's eatwild.com or localharvest.org are two other places where you can actually just go enter your zip code and you can connect with a local meat producer.
Oh, that's great. Okay, well, we'll put all those links in the show notes. So if anyone wants to go look, those will be in there. Also, is there anything else about this conversation that we haven't gone over that you think is really important for people to know?
I mean, unfortunately, it's just a massive game of whack-a-mole because, once you start talking about why meat doesn't actually cause cancer, and it takes a while, right? It's not like, well, this study proved it. You have to explain the problems with nutrition research and causation and correlation and all that. But then they'll say greenhouse gases. So then you explain the greenhouse gases. Then they'll say water. Well, then they take up too much land. Well, then they eat too much feed and we should just be eating the food directly, so, or it's wrong to kill animals. It's just wrong, and so in the beginning of the Sacred Cow book, we actually have sort of a choose your own adventure guide where we actually take all the top questions just because I know them so well now and tell you, okay, does meat cause cancer? Page 62, and you can just kind of go through. So I do want to mention the book and the film are extremely different. So the film, it's a great hour and a half. It's narrated by Ron Swanson, Nick Offerman, who is an amazing person. It's a story. It just shows the stories of people who are doing this, the farming. But the book is like your logical antidote to all of the anti-meat messaging. And it's very well cited, and people do tend to get a lot more out of the book than from the film. The film was great, and I'm glad I did it. It's really helpful for like high school science teachers. But if anyone's really interested in this, I highly recommend the book.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great resource to have. So we'll also leave a link for that. And I want to ask you, so I ask all of my guests this at the very end. I know you're busy. You said you're going to be traveling a lot in the next couple months. What are some practices and things that you do for yourself that are your health non-negotiables? So no matter how crazy your day is, these are things that you prioritize for your health. It can be like eating habits, lifestyle, whatever it is, things that you prioritize.
It can be hard, especially because I'm celiac. So when I travel, I often have a hard time with cross-contamination and ended up getting sick. So good sleep is a non-negotiable. Absolutely have to have a dark room and quiet. So I request, like, if it's a hotel, a room at the end of the hall, not near the elevator. I bring blackout tape with me to cover any of the little lights that are coming from the smoke detectors or the TV. Eat a protein-rich meal, it's kind of helpful to be allergic to the airport, basically, and like have to bring my meat sticks with me. And it's actually funny, when I was stuck in, for the Joe Rogan podcast, the initial taping was supposed to be a year earlier, and I got stuck in those ice storms in Austin.
Oh, man.
And I was living on like Paleo Valley meat sticks. It was really funny. I always have a good book on me. Right now, I'm reading an amazing book called Wilding by Isabella Tree. And I have it on Audible and in the book form, so I can alternate between. I always try to move, whether that's the going for a walk or the hotel gym, but moving. I don't know. It's definitely, traveling can be rough on my body, but
yeah.
Not crazy flight hours. I've learned direct flights, no layovers as much as possible. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. Please tell everyone where they can find you.
Okay. So I have sustainabledish.com is my main website, and that's where you can find the course and more information about me. The Global Food Justice Alliance is at globalfoodjustice.org. And then on Instagram, I'm most active on Instagram. It's Sustainable Dish or Global Food Justice. I'm on Twitter, but I don't really love Twitter because it's usually just vegans trying to argue with me. So I try to avoid Twitter. And then if people want to go just straight to Amazon, you can watch the film in the US on Amazon Prime. In other countries, it's often on iTunes, but every country is slightly different with their licensing and everything. And then, of course, the book, Sacred Cow. So that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I loved this conversation. It was so informative.
I really appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Thank you so much for listening to the Real Foodology podcast. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by Georgie. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can leave us a voicemail by clicking the link in our bio. And if you like this episode, please rate and review on your podcast app. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time. The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical and mental health advice and doesn't constitute a provider-patient relationship. I am a nutritionist, but I am not your nutritionist. As always, talk to your doctor or your health team first.